everybody, and welcome to this special Remembrance podcast with a very special Welshman, Aneurin Owen, who this month, on November 30th, 2024, will celebrate being 100 years old. He sat down with me, Emily Ashworth, FG's online editor, to reflect on life, not just in farming, but his time in World War II in the RAF. He has quite the memory and the stories to go with it, and we started right off back at the beginning with life before war. His family moved to a farm in the Husbands Bosworth area when he was 9 years old in 1934. Apparently it was quite common for Welsh families to move as land was more easily available to rent, which he still recalls to this day. And that is where we start our story.
Yeah, the farming was really a hard and difficult life before the war. A lot of them were small holdings, not a lot of arable land, more land, poor grazing land. But the moorland was the grazing land rather. Some of it was used to grow oats. Oats were one of the main diets for the cattle and humans there. Rolled oats, of course, for your porridge in the mornings. You used to have to take those to a mill nearby, a water mill, to separate the oats husk from the oat itself. That was a horse and cart job, that was, to get there. It was usually a day's job to get to a mill. And then the oats were one main ingredient, I suppose, for the cattle and the humans there, because they were porridge. And of course, we used to grow mangels as well. Not mangels, swedes, sorry, in the fields, to chop up and mix with the oats for feeding the cattle with, or what few cattle they had, you know. And nearly every farm had a cow or two to make butter with, which they obviously use themselves or sold it in the local shops in Dolgellau, in our case. Butter was probably one of the main income at that time. My mother just needed to sell butter every week to pay the household bills. There wouldn't have been much in any case, because the butter probably for a pack of butter would be only 10 shillings maybe, or even less. All the farms, all holdings, kept pigs. Yeah. Pigs was probably their main meat diet. They could use it, and they were killed with a month of letter R in it. The reason for that was because it was cold weather. You start off from September, October, November, December, January, February and March, and April in Welsh, and then during that a colder period, hopefully, they kill the pig. My father used to go out killing pigs for the local farmers there. I used to look forward to that. You get some nice fresh pork at the time. Yeah, I suppose they did the bacon as well. So sides of bacon and hang that up in a pantry with a perforated cover for it to keep the flies off it. Because that was a problem, of course, keeping flies off it. I think pork was the main meal they had, and bacon as well. The size of bacon to hang up there, and the nice homemade bacon, beautiful.
Before the war, who did you live with on the farm? It was your mum, your dad?
Yes, just me and my mum and my dad. And I used to go to my grandparents a lot next door, quite a lot. They were very good. And my father said he used to go, he didn't have any sheep of his own, he used to have sheep for the winter, they're grazing for the winter. And I remember in 1929 that it was a terrible year, winter, deep snow and frost, and my school was closed. I'd only just started school and it was closed for 3 weeks, couldn't get to school. Yeah, school. And then regarding the weather, it cleared up eventually. And I remember going with my father, we used to take sheep in for winter period, for winter grazing, going around in some of the woodland there, cutting ivy down so the sheep could eat ivy leaves. I remember that quite well. I'd only just started school then as well.
Do you remember how big the farm was? How much land did you have?
A lot of land, but a lot of it, I think it's the best part of 1,000 is a big hillside, mountainside. and you only graze one sheep per acre on that land. Then the lower land, of course, was kept, in our case, was used for growing oats mainly, and also Swedes. I'm trying to think else. I didn't think of growing it much else on there. Oats are the only cereal that I remember them growing. I don't remember growing anything else. But it was an ingredient that everybody used, you know, for the meals. It's a good day I had to go to the mill, the water mill, to get them crushed and separated from the husk.
Yeah.
And then, of course, all this material that was supposed to be waste, we used to mix it with Swedes and give it to the cattle to eat.
Next, Aneurin wanted to talk about sheep and the process of shearing and dipping. It was once quite a communal affair. We also touched on wool and its demise over the years, because to look back on the sheep industry at 100 years old and the changes in it must be quite something.
There's a photograph there of my grandfather shearing there, where there's two types of hand clippers he used to use. So the dagging shears, short-bladed ones, and then there would be two people cutting the wool off the belly and inside the legs around the neck, then tying the legs up to pass them on to the shearer. And the shearer wasn't ready, well, at least to leave the sheep with its legs tied up the other side of him, ready for the next one. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, but, the shearing job, it was a big affair really, because all the neighbouring farmers come and help one another, because it was a big job. A good shearer, after they've been clipped out, could do about 100 a day, and she was quite a lot. But of course the sheep not very big, and he used to have long bladed shears as well, very long ones, and very, very sharp.
What did you do with the wool? Because, you know, we still don't get a lot of money for wool now, do we?
You don't. Well, the wool was, used to get it spun at a local mill somewhere there, I can't remember where, and make blankets with it, you know, bedding material. And I found out that I didn't care much for it. It was a bit coarse, a lot of it was. You know,
Let's talk about then, before we talk about the war, I want to talk about dogs.
Dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you've had an interest in dogs, haven't you?
Yes, I have, yes, I have. No, we didn't have one at home, but my grandparents did next door. And I think that was Ross, I think the dog's name was, if I remember rightly. But I had dogs after, when I lived in Husband Boswell, I got several dogs. I kept certainly 3 very good dogs. Scott, Ben and Cap, names were, remember that? That was much later, of course, that one, after moving to Bosworth.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah.
But you were involved, weren't you, with, you were on the committee?
Yes,
Yes,
that's right. I was treasurer of the Sheepdog Trials for a while, yeah. After I moved here.
And the timekeeper for English Nationals.
Yes.
Would you have liked to compete with the dog?
Yes, I think, I don't know why I didn't compete.
Yeah.
I could have done, but I did quite a few years judging here. But I'm sorry now, I didn't do the judging job. I didn't think I was good enough. I don't know.
Maybe that can be your next thing. We can do it before when you're 100.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about the war then, because lots of things changed.
Yeah.
Men had to leave their farms and go off to war, and I know that you joined the RAF.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that time in your life?
I suppose what got me interested in aeroplanes was Alan Cobham used to come to Village with a flying circus, and I remember seeing there's some good photographs of them in there. In the local farm, and he used to do the local air show. But anyway, beginning the war, I thought, well, I'd like to go in the Air Force. And of course, in agriculture, certainly one of the industries is a reserved occupation, the word was right. So in other words, you didn't have to be called up, you could come out of it. But anyway, I did volunteer for that, and accepted for aircrew to an RAF base in Cardington to start with, to see if I was suitable. And of course I passed fine and went off to London then on a course in London. That was right at the beginning, and then they found I was too young. I wasn't quite 18 then, I was about 17 3/4, I suppose. And they sent me home till I became 18. And they called me up into 42 at the end, yeah. and it was called and went to London for a few weeks training or medical tests and all sorts of things like that at London to make sure I was healthy enough to do it. From there I went to Bridgenorth, which is an early school for aircrew there, or ITW I think it was called, Initial Training Wing it was called.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And then we had to do learn RAF law and also how to march properly, all sorts of things when there, as much as the Airforce, you know. And when you passed out, you test your parade tests and there, you sent off then to radio school. I was there for quite a while in Yates, but it's a long course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've still got the paperwork from them days.
Wow.
And then from there, I was kept back after passing out. I was held back for a while. I don't know for certain why. Could help out some of the civilian instructors. There were a lot of civilian instructors he was hard retired, but using naval ones, and they were very good at doing the Morse code and the signals.
Right. Yeah.
And then I went to Scotland then to West Frew, which was a station where surveyed the convoy coming off the near Atlantic, and so to search for any U-boats that might be around there. And then from then onwards, I went to Peploe in Shropshire, well, which was not a very nice base. Flying New Wellington bombers there, and the ground was really bad autumn and wet, and the aircraft were getting stuck in the mud. So it was eventually closed down, and I was transferred to Lichfield, where the Bulcum were Canadians and Australians, and there was much better food, of course, as well. We used to fly a lot of food over from Canada. Now there's a photograph somewhere of the Christmas party in 1944 there, where they flew some turkey all the way from Canada.
Oh wow!
Never had Canada. Never had any turkeys before. Nearly always geese, weren't they, kept for?
Yeah, yeah.
For Christmas time those days. After Lichfield, I went to Yorkshire to HCU Heavy Conversion Unit there. Should have been on Halifaxes, but the Halifaxes had developed a really bad fault and had to ground them all and bring in Lancasters.
Okay, yeah.
So on to Lancasters from there, and then on to Scampton, where I was based for some time. And then from there, after being in Scampton at the end of the war, I was transferred to a unit to test the application of radar for the new V bombers. You know, the Cold War was just being talked about, and then I was into Binbrook, and so I ended the Binbrook, end of the war, I suppose. Yes, it would be just after the end of the war. That's where I finished. Yeah.
While you were with the RAF, who was running the farm at home?
My mother, of course, and I had 3 sisters, and then Ed Smith's mother would help the housework in there, and Dad as well. His father helped for a bit, but the Italian prisoners of war were the main labour ones. They could do anything. They could hand milk, or they could hand milking cows, of course, those days, and they could hand milk as well. There were Italian farmers, northern Italy, and they would look after the farm. But my mother was going. I thought about giving it up, but she went to see the owner of the farm, Colonel Peter from Bosworth Hall. I didn't mention that before, did I? And he's persuaded to give it a try and stay at the farm, which he did. I'll help you what I can, he said. And I think the farm was £2 an acre. It was £2 an acre rent those days.
Wow.
It was difficult to let them even, because even before the war, there's some land there, probably 15 shillings an acre, and it's impossible to let them at all sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After the war,
yeah,
and you went home, what happened when you took on the farm?
Milk was a product then, a guaranteed price for milk, and that became a product of the farm to get a reasonable living. So I decided to go to a local farm land here, because we had been in the process of changing the farm not long before, but this was a 364-day tenancy. Now, I didn't like that at all, but anyway, I went ahead with it, and we had a dairy herd going in there, supplying milk, guaranteed price for the milk, which is quite a reasonable living, but I still wasn't happy with this 364 days. So I eventually managed to buy the land, but I hadn't got a lot of money those days, so I sold again to somebody else locally for a small dairy farm with cows as well, and then just moved to mainly sheep. Cattle and sheep were an arable for a while, but it became all sheep at the end.
After the war, when you went home to farm,
Yeah.
How old were you?
Yeah, 22.
Yeah.
22, yeah.
And would you have liked to stay in the RAF?
I was recommended for a commission, and they said we put in a hole for the time because the Royal Airforce had a surplus of officers then, or there would be in the end of the war. But if I decided to stay in, then I would get my commission. So unfortunately, I had to come home because with the Italian prisoner of war going home, eventually going home, and I was needed back at home to help the mother out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got your sheep, you got some sheep.
Yeah.
And I've been told that you were a bit of a trendsetter when it comes to sheep.
Oh yeah.
What sort of things were you doing on farm?
Muslim sheep to start with.
Oh.
From Yorkshire, aren't they, Muslim? But I decided to go on mule Muslims eventually to get better lambing percentage and also better wool, because the wool was worth quite a bit of money those days. It came to quite a lot of money. Usually go to a grader who's graded here, or Briggs from Bradford. He's come here each year to grade the wool and weigh it and give you a cheque for it that day.
Oh, that quick?
Yeah, and that was, of course, the wool was a marketable quality, and also it's government supported. Yeah. The wool was wanted both for clothing mostly, or bed linen in particular.
I think that's what we need now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
a
so.
bit of support.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And I can see here as well, it says you won a competition for best kept grazing land.
Yes. There was a weed problem in here around this part of the world, especially thistles and nettles to some extent, but also to twitch and also to couch grass, which was just thick leaves and you smother everything. But fortunately, Monsanto brought a new chemical out, Roundup, and that got rid of it too. And then I made sure that I used to have an apple spray outside the Land Rover and spray the bottom of the hedges with it to kill all the nettles and thistles. And then on the farm competition, I think I was second. The next following year I won it. And he said, I haven't seen any thistles or nettles. He said, you won't, so I've been spraying them. And there wasn't any at all on the farm. In Wales, because before the war, the sheep dip in there was compulsory, because the sheep diseases, scab was one, and I can't remember what the other one was. And of course, I can't remember if they were then, but just after the war when I was dipping, scab dipping and also the other disease, a policeman had to be on duty, and time they've got to be in the dip for at least 1 minute.
How things have changed.
Very much so, haven't they? Yeah, different world, isn't it, altogether? And then when the new dips came out, much better, long-lasting dips, the compulsory dipping was finished.
What about now? What are your thoughts about farming now?
Well, it's a different world altogether, isn't it? Completely. Yeah, because my grandson's in farming, of course, milk a lot he used, and cattle as well. But it's different market altogether now. The old butcher shops have all gone.
Yeah.
I can't think of any around here at the moment. Well, there's one in South Kilworth. That's the only one I know of now. Yes, it's changed the world with the farming altogether. You have a market.
And so much technology.
So very much so, but that comes into it a lot. Technology, yeah, it does.
And where's your grandson farming?
In near Lawn Abbey, he's got 1,700 sheep there.
Does that feel quite nice for you because somebody else, you know, in your family is almost keeping that going?
Yes, it's nice to think there's a family's carrying on the sheep in particular, because that's what my main living was from farming, from sheep. Of course, shearers come in like I used to at one time, but didn't shear our own like we used to at one time. And then you got some cattle as well.
I think there's probably more than one thing that you could say, but what have you loved about your life?
I think, generally speaking, farming, I was quite happy with farming, really.
Yeah.
Except when we first moved here in 1934, the United Dairies had only just started with government subsidies and that. So we started milking cows down at our farm here, and I hated the job. Manure to clean out with a fork and shovel, and then the cows were dirty. In the winter time, we had to scrape, wash the cows down banks and time before milking, and it really was a dirty job. I thought, no, I did hate it to start with. Yeah, and I had to milk. And I probably as well didn't help. My father made me milk 2 cows before I went to school in the morning. Hand milk this was, of course. And 2 more when I came home. And after I've been milked 2 cows after coming home, I was allowed to go anywhere.
And they say, don't they, that farming is not a job. It has to be a lifestyle. You have to love what you do.
You have to, yeah, it is really, because my grandson recently employed somebody, or set them to start work, to do general farm work. And of course, about 5 hours, I think Friday afternoon came, and the weekend off. You can't have the weekend on the farm.
Surprise!
Oh, yeah.
And what about, advice? Because it's quite difficult to get into farming now. A lot of people can't just farm to make a living. What's your advice to people in the industry?
Anything really in the farming world, it is hard work, and I'm not sure exactly what the best thing would be advice for them for that purpose. But you've got to like farming to start with, in any case.
Next, I was told that Aneurin had a particular fondness for horses and one special horse. So we got on to talking about that, but there's also a fantastic picture online on the FGA website where you can find Aneurin's written story and video where there's a picture of him and his family with one of their beloved horses. It's also quite interesting to hear people talk about life on farm before tractors, before all this technology. At one point, that is all Aneurin would have known, and that would have been the process. So in this clip, you'll hear him talk a little bit about his beloved horse, Mona.
Oh yeah, Mona. Yeah, it's my favourite horse. There's a photograph of Mona. She came from Wales to here, and then she was a lovely old mare. Well, she wasn't old; she was a young mare. And she used to do horse hoeing to start with, hoeing mangles and Swedes. And mangle we used to feed the cattle with, of course, in the winter time. And Swedes would be the first vegetable grown for the humans used to eat them as well. But when mechanisation started at the beginning of the war, there was forts and tractors came into being, a lot of it imported from the United States. And of course, horsepower itself became redundant mostly. My father died in 1940, and then I thought later that year I saw 1 or 2 tractors about, and I did manage to buy. I thought a new one. It was 96 pounds of a Fordson tractor, brand new. My father had bought one 2 or 3 years before for £25, a second-hand one, but there was no mud guards or anything on it. It was a bit dangerous altogether. Yeah. So I got rid of that, and then we got the newer tractor, and then I decided, well, the horse was no longer needed now, so I decided to sell this mare. I took her to Harbour Horse Fair in 1940, in the autumn, and I wanted, for the old mare, I was very fond of her, and I wanted £100 for her, which meant she had to make 100 guineas at the market, and guineas were the price monetary unit used them days, which is 21 shillings a guinea, of course. And the auctioneer kept the odd guinea, so I got £70 I wanted. And you got to £65, and I wouldn't let it go. So I took it home again, walked all the way home from Harbour to husband Bosworth. And a few days later, I had a message from Ladies Ear Werner's jockey, he was, from Thorpe Lubbock Hall. And she understood, I've got a horse to sell. She said, how much do you want for it? And I said, well, I've got one mare here, but I want £70 for it. I'm not letting it go for less. Or can you bring it down and see, let Ladies Ear Werner see it? And she was the grandmother of Aunt Nicholas, who was assassinated by the Russian communists.
Wow.
And she managed to come here with all her wealth. Anyway, she looked at Mona, and she was quite happy with her, and went back to the yard and got me a cheque for £70. I walked back home quite happy there. Yeah.
What kind of horse was she?
A Shire horse.
Shire?
Yes, it's quite a big horse.
Wow.
I think I think she's about 17 hands, I think, at the shoulder. I see you measure them by hands, which is 4 inches, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah, she would be about 17 hands.
Now, I am sure that Aneurin has a million more stories about his time in the war, and I would love to hear more of them. But for this particular interview, we spoke about VE Day, where he was in the plains dropping food aid for people. Now, there is a fantastic picture. Again, if you want to see it, head to the FG website. But somebody got a shot of Aneurin's plane, his Lancaster bomber, flying right past St Paul's Cathedral in London. Now, he was in that plane, he was dropping food. It was the end of the war, everybody was celebrating, but it didn't quite go to plan. So I'll let Aneurin tell you that story, but what an incredible life this man has had, both on farm and during the war. And these people are the people that we definitely should be celebrating. So if you do have any stories, remember to try and capture them while we can. This is an Aneurin story of him dropping food on VE Day. Right, I've just got one more question.
Have you?
Yeah, is that all right?
So what the question is, shall we?
Yeah. I just want to know about the dropping food on VE Day, because we've got this very special, let's just grab it.
That's right, on there, yes.
This very special award in front of us because of your work on VE Day.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about it?
Nobody knew that you had to drop food from an aircraft at that time, and we had to do some practice work with how to drop the food, and also the way of packaging it. Anyway, the first trials we had was at Scampton, and unfortunately, there's just one netting. We've got like these parcels of food, flour mostly and sugar, a few other tinned items as well. I can't remember what the tinned items were now. And when we dropped it too high to start with, I think dropped it from about 200 feet, and the netting broke and scattered the stuff everywhere.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So it was a real mess. Eventually found the best way of doing it was to double net it, and then one net would break and the other one would hold the food, whatever it was in there. It could be sugar, flour, tins of food. I don't remember about potatoes, but certainly that was the main thing there. And then we found out the best way of dropping was from about 50 feet, no higher. And then 40 feet was better.
Yeah.
Yeah. On VE Day, you'll see a photograph of Lancaster going over St Paul's Cathedral. And that was our last one. That was drop.
Wow.
And I remember seeing the clock, a parallel to the clock in the racecourse in The Hague. It was just about 20 to 12, I think it was.
Yeah. Wow. What a thing to have done.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible. I just want to say a huge thank you to Aneurin, who I hope I have practiced your name enough now to try and say it the whole way through this recording, so I hope I've done you justice. But a huge thank you to your family and your friends who helped me set this up as well. What an incredible life you've had. These stories of farming in the last century are really important because farming is changing quite quickly. Things change overnight in the industry, so to be able to look back at where the industry's come from and where we're going is really interesting but also really important. So thank you for sharing your story. Remember to maybe give a little nod to these people on Remembrance Sunday, and I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. It's been a little bit different. We've done it in a little bit of a different way, but it's been absolutely fantastic to be able to capture Aneurin Owen's story for Farmer's Guardian. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed. I'd love to hear your feedback, but Farmer's Guardian will be back again next week with another podcast episode. So don't forget to subscribe on your favourite platform, and always let us know what you think. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.